Singing is the lowest form of communication.
Maria Callas said to sing is an expression of your being. Edith Piaf said singing was a way of escaping. And yes, Homer, the other Homer, said it was the lowest form of communication. What do you think? Why do we sing? Where does the voice come from? My name is Karen Myatt, and I pose these questions and more to some of the greatest singers of our time. Welcome to La Voce Vita. I am very excited to introduce one of the first women ever to write and produce and sing hard rock. She is a three-time Toronto Music Award winner for Best Female Vocalist. She released her first album at the age of 19 and just released her latest album this very year in 2024. In 2023, she was inducted into Canada's Walk of Fame. So needless to say, I am honored to welcome today's guest, Lee Aaron. Lee, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, it's so funny.
I think you're out in Vancouver right now, but I believe a good place to start always is with where you're originally from and how you got into music.
It's Melville, Ontario. I lived until I was 2, and then I moved to the Winnipeg area. We lived in a suburb of Winnipeg called Transcona, and I didn't start in a band there. In fact, we moved back to Ontario when I was 10, but I did have a little bit of a weird introduction to the rock and roll kind of sort of scene. We lived a couple doors down from a family, Blair and Anne McLean, and their son Kevin was a good friend of my sister's and I. Blair McLean was in a group called the Vicious Circle, and him and his brother had a comedy troupe called McLean and McLean. You probably I don't know if you're old enough to remember them, but they called it toilet rock, and it was kind of like this really kind of absurd, crazy humor that they would do. But they were friends with Burton Cummings. And so Burton Cummings was a frequent visitor at their home. It was just like this bohemian vibe. And we were having parties over there. And it was I loved hanging out there because it was a very musical household. And so I was very attracted to it at that age. And then we moved back. My dad got transferred back to Ontario, and I was living in a suburb of Toronto, the Brampton area. And I'd been very, very involved in musical theater productions my entire life. My mom was a singer. My mom sang in church choir, though. That was her jam. And I was singing in a musical theater production when I was 15 years old. I had the lead. And the bass player from a local band that happened to go to our high school, he was in grade 12, saw me sing because his brother was working behind the scenes on the production. And he's like, wow, you have a great voice. Would you love to join? Would you like to audition for our band? And I was just like, wow, well, cool. I'd never sang rock and roll before, but that might be fun. So I auditioned for the band when I was 15. My father came as my chaperone to accompany me, of course. At first there was quite a bit of hesitation because this was a group that was sort of the prodigy kids from a neighboring high school, played guitar and bass, and the bass player from my school and this keyboard player, and they were not into the idea of having a woman singing. Of course, that was just at that time, but and they called me back like the next day, and they're like, well, yeah, like we really haven't heard anyone who could sing as good as you. And voila, I was in a rock band. And that's kind of how it all started for me. And then I started listening to a lot more edgy material. Within a couple of years, Pat Benatar had come out with her first album, and because we were doing some Heart covers, some Zeppelin, some Joplin, some AC/DC, things that were higher range that I could sing. And so that's kind of how it all started.
You mentioned Pat Benatar and some other folks there. When I've listened to you, I'm like, oh my God, she sounds like Bruce Dickinson or like Geddy Lee. Like the range is so amazing. Do you have other singer influences from that time or over the years?
probably my two biggest influences when I was a teenager growing up were the Wilson sisters. And I've said that many times, many times, when that Baby Lestrange album hit in 1980, do you remember the cover of that record? Baby Lestrange. It was black and white. It was the Wilson sisters side by side. Before the 80s fashion became a thing, they had their permed hair and they had chokers. And I was just like, oh man, they look so incredibly cool. So I was like, that's who I want to be. And I was 17 years old at the time. I just listened to so much Ann Wilson and, tried to emulate her. Robert Plant and Ann Wilson were my two greatest vocal teachers. Just, hiding away in my basement with my little suitcase record player, and I'd put those albums on and I would just sing for hours and hours. I found it cathartic and I was just so passionate about it.
I am the one who can please you, ain't that what you said? You seem so alone, 'cause I was easily led. I showed you my love, babe, I guess that it went to your head. And when you were hungry, I brought you your breakfast in bed. Come on, even it up, even it up, even it up. Ooh, even it up, even it up, even it up, yeah.
I guess you were probably imitating and mimicking for a while. Was it difficult for you to find your own voice and your own sound through that?
That was kind of an evolution, I think, over the years. And I feel like, in a weird way, it's still an evolution. I feel like I'm always refining and nuancing and the particular tones that I want to hear or the attitude that I want to give, especially that I've become really adept at home recording as well, because now I'm recording myself, right? But I mean, early on my first album that I recorded and released when I was 19 years old, I think my first manager realized, that I had this kind of voice that had the ability to be loud and high and quite powerful. And so he had me doing a lot of that, wah, kind of stuff. So that, I really didn't know what I was doing on my first album, but, I had a lot of coaching from him. I worked with Buzz Sherman from Moxie on that first album. Rick Emmett sang on my first album, and I learned a lot about what I learned from Rick Emmett on that first album, because he came in to do some backgrounds on one of the records, was how you could use a vocal pad as like a counterpoint melody, like an alternating melody in your chorus, or an answer melody, and you could stack it with harmonies, and it could become like another repeating motif in your chorus that was also another hook. And that was really like a light bulb went off for me, and that sort of became like a Lee Aaron. Well, it was sort of an 80s formula, but it became like a Lee Aaron formula we tended to use going forward with a lot of the recording from that point on as well.
Oh, I wanna feel it again. Under your spell, how could you tell I was under your spell? Under your spell, how could you tell I was under your spell? Under your spell, how could you tell I was under your spell? Oh, under your spell, how could you tell I was under your spell?
Were you songwriting from the very beginning, or were you collaborating?
I was collaborating literally on material since the time I was about 15. And I'd won a couple poetry contests actually in school. So I was always lyric writing. my first album, obviously, I was still quite a kid and I didn't really know what I was doing. So what my first manager did is he put me together with Rick Santers. He put me together with Frank Soda and a couple of other people, and had me do some co-writing with some other writers. But that was a great learning experience for me to learn, that, okay, this is how it goes back and forth, how you collaborate. Mostly I learned about how to more accurately finesse melody and structure of the phrasing on top of music. Like people would hand me music and they'd be like for Santers, for example, he would just hand me something written and go, okay, this is what I hear as the verse section. Here's the pre-chorus, here's the chorus, see what you can come up with. And so yeah, I learned a lot more about song structure and how to write a top line at that time. Although obviously, I don't know if all artists say this, but I mean, I feel like I'm doing some of my best work now. Like, I feel like it's still quite an evolutionary process where every album I'm challenged to do better than I did on the album before, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the scariest things for artists, especially when they have great success like you have, is, oh, how do I do that again? How do I do that better? And the reason why you've been doing it for so long, I'm sure, is because you're constantly challenging yourself that way.
Yeah, many of my contemporaries that are I guess you'd put us in the category of legacy artists now, right? Because we've all been doing this 35, 40 years. Many of my contemporaries are kind of content to not record anymore. They haven't made an album since 1986. And there is certainly a market for that. You can go out and just replay your hits over and over again. And there's, because people love nostalgia and they love being transported back to that time and feeling and place where those songs take them. And of course, I offer an element of that when I do my live shows. I'm never gonna not play What You Do to My Body and Metal Queen and Some Girls Do and Hands On and songs that are hits for me. But I don't know, just my spirit, my personal spirit, and my just the way I operate, I guess, as an artist is I'm constantly hungry and wanting to sink my teeth into something new and challenging. And for me, that is either being an interpreter of other people's material or to keep moving forward, writing new material. And yeah, I'm never going to sell the amount of records that I used to sell back in the 80s and 90s. Number one, the industry is not what it was in that regard. But my motivation for doing that is the reward for me is not how many albums I sold or how successful it was. The reward is the creative process of doing it and working with my band and learning how to become a better producer and a better songwriter and a better singer.
She comes like thunder rising from the ground. She'll bring you under. She moves without a sound. She holds a passion like no other could. No one she talks, the word is understood.
ask you about the jazz phase that you had in 2000. I think you started the jazz, couple of jazz albums that you did. I'd love to know, I started in jazz and musical theater, so I always wanted to know what inspired you to make those records.
Number one, I obviously had quite a bit of background in that, going through musical. I was involved in musical theater most of my schooling years from 5 years old onward. So I was really quite familiar with Cole Porter, Rogers and Hart, and so much of that Tin Pan Alley writer material, which a lot of it was the old jazz and blues pop songs of that era, right? And so I was very, very familiar with that. Got into rock and roll, but then when I was 21 years old, I was in a nightclub in Berlin one night. We were touring in Germany, and this song came on the sound system, and I was just like, who is that? And it was Nina Simone, and I'd never heard Nina Simone before. And it was like a love affair, a lifelong love affair that started for me with her. And so all throughout my rock years, I had been listening to, Anita O'Day and Ella Fitzgerald and Sarah Vaughan, and like, just to name a few, Miles Davis and John Coltrane, and I loved all that stuff, but I was always really shy to talk about it, because back in the 80s, it was like rock or die. You're in this camp or you're not cool. And I was like, oh no, I love Ronnie James Dio, which I did as well, and Aerosmith, and but I had this secret love affair with a lot of this material. And then in the 90s, when grunge happened, and it kind of annihilated the careers of a lot of people that were associated with classic rock of the 80s. I took a year off in 1996 because my manager jumped ship. A whole bunch of things fell apart for me. And a friend of mine said, well, you're staying home and you're licking your wounds and listening to your old Billie Holiday records. Why don't you just go out and sing that stuff? And I went, because I, at that time, I had no inclination whatsoever to want to get back on the pop culture bandwagon. I felt like it had eaten me up and spit me out. And I just wasn't wanting to go there again and be part of that world with a big record company. And I thought, maybe I should, And so I just started working with a piano player in Vancouver. And we got a couple of little nightclub gigs just doing jazz and blues. And that kind of evolved into me getting a house gig at this place called the Purple Onion, and they were paying me I had a 3-piece behind me at that point. I had a bass player and a sax player, and then suddenly that gig, just people found out Lee Aaron is doing this jazz gig, and someone wrote on the bathroom wall in Sharpie, Lee Aaron's Jazz Rocks. And I just thought that was so ironic and funny, but it's like I was a gateway artist for a lot of rockers to start appreciating jazz. And it was the beginning of the sort of like swing era coming back a little bit again in the late 90s. And suddenly, like the Vancouver Sun is there, and the Star, and all these publications, and they were reviewing my show, and it snowballed from that into me getting invited to do a bunch of jazz festivals across the country. I did the Ottawa Jazz Festival. I did the Harbourfront in Toronto. I played the Top of the Senator. And I was just like, wow, like I wasn't expecting that.
You let all the women make a fool of you. Why don't you do gotta do right, do right, do right. You gotta do right, like some other men do. You gotta get out of here and get me some money to
vocally, like how much of an adjustment was that for you? Did you have to do any training or was it like just by ear? What changed for you?
It was using my voice in a different way. I mean, the lovely thing is I didn't have to go out there and shout over top of electric instruments every night, right? That's a challenge with rock and roll, right? It's but you know, I have managed to survive all these years and still have a voice.
Do you have any secrets for that? How do you, I've listened to some of the textures and tones, especially in your rock singing. It's just, I don't know how you get those sounds and how you have the stamina to sing full shows and tours and over all the years. Um, do you just have chords of steel or do you have tips and tricks?
I'm not going to lie, every once in a while I'll have like a rough patch and I'll go, oh, the first thing that goes is your falsetto. You know that, right? You know, when you're either tired or worn down or not hydrated well enough, or usually it's lack of sleep for me, or just overexerting my voice. You know, it's interesting because our daughter is in her second year at Capilano University in the musical theater program there, and she said to me, she goes, Mom, I think the trick is not to sing less, it's to sing more.
Huh.
And I was like, oh, you're probably right. And so, you know, so it's accepting that your vocal cord is a muscle.
Mhm.
And you don't just like take 6 months off the gym and go to the gym and try to lift 100 pounds over your head. You have to work up to it, right? And so before I have gigs coming up, I'm at least 3 weeks of working up to that stamina again. And there's never a time in my life where I take months and months and months off. I'm always singing a bit, right? So really it's building up to that. It's you know, you might hear a very, very gritty tone or a very gritty texture that I've recorded on an album. But in a live scenario, you know, with the ambience of the room, and then, you know, the sound man's usually put some slap back on my voice, I usually don't sing that gritty live. It's more important to me to hit the note than have the grit, because especially if I've got to go do it tomorrow night and the night after as well, you know. So you know, and I think one of the other things I've learned over the years is there can actually be some power in holding back. You don't have to go out there and full on kill yourself every night. It's more important, like I said, to hit the note than to blow your vocal cords out and overexert them. So I treat it very carefully, like an instrument. I try to stay hydrated. I've got a couple of little tricks that I do. I sleep on a wedge pillow. I think I might have talked about this once or twice in another interview, because, you know, literally past the age of 25, if you're eating anything that's spicy or acidic at all, you get reflux. It's just,
Yeah.
it's a thing, and it's a voice destroyer. It comes back and it kind of burns on your vocal cords. So I sleep on a wedge pillow so that my upper part of my body is elevated, so that I don't have that issue. I don't party like it's 1999 anymore.
Yep.
None of that for me. I have something that I just recently bought called Vocal Mist. Have you heard of this?
I have heard of this. Yes. What do you
It's
think?
like a nebulizer. It's like a nebulizer, and I try to do it every couple of days, and it's a very, very low grade saline solution. And it's like going to the hospital when you're sick and getting a nebulizer. And it just, I breathe it in and out. I'll do like a little vial of the saline solution, and just, it keeps your vocal cords hydrated and your lungs healthy. And I also, again, always warm up with scales before a concert, so that by the time I walk out on stage, you know, I'm not just going for that high note without having worked up to it before I walk out there.
So we've talked a bit about the physical aspect of singing then. Where does the voice come from? So is it something that you're like a vessel, a messenger? Is it a spiritual thing for you? Is it something that's generationally passed down? Is it physical therapy? What is the voice for you? Where does it come from?
This is an abstract question. So, wow.
I
I
know.
know that. So here's the thing, like my mom suffered a little bit from depression and postpartum depression in the early part of my life, but she loved to sing. And so when I was a little girl and I would wake up and I would hear her singing, I'd go, it's going to be a good day. Mama's singing. So I equated singing with joy and happiness. So for me, I think it's a very metaphysical thing, if that makes sense. Like it obviously comes from me being able to physically create that sound, but what inspired me to sing was, I don't know, it wasn't an option. I was going to be a singer. And I knew that from the time I was 5 years old. So I feel like I didn't really make the choice, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
However, it's evolved into a craft that I do have to work at. It does involve hard work.
If you could put one song in every set for every show you do for the rest of your life, what would it be?
My fans might not love this idea, but because obviously I have to play my hits, but I would put the song 21. It's a song that I wrote for the Radio On album, which was ironically released in 2021. But it is a song that I wrote on piano. It's a ballad. And a lot of the piano songs that I write, again, you were talking about that whole spiritual thing, metaphysical thing, like I don't even really know where they come from. They just come and then they happen. And probably more than any other song I've ever written, that song was one of them. I wanted to write a song about, it was really a passionate song for my fans, real diehard fans that have been with me from really, really early years on to now. I mean, I have fans literally that I've known for over 30 years that come to all my shows. It's amazing. And I wanted a song for them, and I wanted it to be about, do you remember when we were 21? Where's the time gone? It you know, it feels like it's gone like that. Friends have come, friends have gone, friends have come and gone, and we've lost people, and we've lived through parenthood and trials and tribulations, and look at us now, we're still here. And that's kind of what that song is all about. It's about this empowering journey of strength that we've all taken.
What is time but a fuzzy line between memories and the truth? Who am I to keep a picture in my mind of those London nights with with you. I remember 21, when everything was new under the sun. Who knows where the time goes? So many friends have come and gone. It feels like yesterday you said you'd never run away, but it was 25 years ago in a love song. I remember 21, making love beneath the setting sun, young and wild before the West was won, when dreams of life and love had just begun. 21. Who knows where the time goes? I remember 21, making love beneath the setting sun, before the path we chose was set and done. Oh, we're all prodigal sisters and prodigal sons. It's time leading the blind for everyone. Always in my mind, I'm 21. 21, still on the run. 21, still on the run. 21, still on the We're all prodigal sisters and prodigal sons, and it's time leading the blind for everyone. Who knows where the time goes? Always in my mind, I'm 21.
If you had a piece of advice you'd like to share with a new singer, I think singers can have a career at any age. So maybe not just young singers, just anybody who's choosing to start singing.
Be influenced, but don't imitate.
Mm.
Hard work pays off. There's I don't know if you've read any Malcolm Gladwell books, but there's certainly something to be said for putting in the 10,000 hours. Yeah. But whether you're singing for work or for pleasure, believe in yourself, because confidence when you walk up to that microphone is the best. Like that's the fire and that's the spark that's going to carry you, right? Is the finding the ability to be confident. It's interesting. I was on a panel. It wasn't a judging panel. It was actually like a workshop that I did a couple of years ago my guitar player and I were giving advice to young new artists. And there was this rap guy that came up, and he stood at his mic like this. And he was just like, like, here, I'll here's a Sharpie. Here, grabbed his mic, and he just stood there like this. And he was like, da, 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 doing his rap thing. And I'm like, okay, that was good. And I could just see like, he's got a ton of potential. So the first thing I did is I walked up and I'm like, okay, first thing I'm going to take that mic out of the stand, and I'm taking your stand away. And I said, there's your microphone. Now what I want you to do is don't stop yourself from moving this time. Go sing and do it again. And he was like 500% better the next time. So find your confidence.
Thank you so much. I think everybody listening will really get a lot of what you had to share today.
100% a pleasure. And it was really, really nice to be asked some questions about singing.
Thank you, Lee.
And thank you for joining us for this interview with vocalist Lee Aaron. To learn more about Lee, visit leeaaron.com. And to hear more, follow the link in the description below to the Spotify playlist inspired by today's episode. If you enjoyed La Voce Vita, please share it and subscribe to the Karen Myatt YouTube channel, or visit karenmyatt.ca for more news and information. Follow us on social media and click the bell to be notified when we release a new episode. Finally, we want to hear from you. If you have a question, a suggestion, a request, or music to share, feel free to send us a note in the comments below or at karenmyatt.ca/message. Until next time, I'm Karen Myatt, and thanks for listening to La Voce Vita.